This meeting of the Norwood City Council is hereby called to order. Please rise for the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, is the body we congregate in these council chambers. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mrs. Stickley. Mr. Blair.
Here.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Here.
Mr. Sanker.
Here.
Mr. Mumper.
Here.
We have 6 members present, which is more than a quorum. We have two requests to amend the agenda. The first is to remove communication number 2, the letter from the law director. That was meant as to be distributed among council members and not for the agenda. And then I would ask that the letter from Chief Kramer be moved up to follow the minutes of the previous meeting. Mr. Mumper.
I move we suspend the rules that you just stated.
Seconded by Mr. Bonsall. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We will therefore move to communication from Chief Kramer. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to do minutes of the previous meeting. Minutes from the December 13th, 2016 meeting. They were distributed by email. Mr. Clark.
Move to approve the minutes as a read.
Seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Now we'll move on to the letter from Chief Kramer regarding Officer Mike Jackson with the Life Saving Award.
Dear Mr. Brown, I would like to be on the council agenda on December 27th to present Officer Mike Jackson the Life Saving Award. Sincerely, William Kramer, Chief of Police, Norwood, Ohio.
Mr. Mumper.
I move we receive and file the letter and allow him to do that.
Seconded by Mr. Blair. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hannerhan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Chief Kramer and Officer Jackson.
Madam President, Council, thank you for allowing me to come up here and present this award tonight. Been chief now for 5 years, and this is only the second time we've presented this award. I know when I contacted Mike, he was apprehensive, felt like he was just doing his job and really not deserving of this award. And I can understand that. I imagine he's uncomfortable standing here now, so I'll make this as painless as possible for him. He is definitely deserving of this award. Some of you may have seen the pursuit that ended in a crash where Mike pulled the guy from the pursuit. And I think, regardless, he's deserving of this award. But when you take into account the fact that you had a guy who didn't really care about his own life, certainly endangered Mike and every other police officer that was involved in the chase's life and the public's life, and Mike still went above and beyond to pull him out of the car to make sure that he remained safe. So, got a quick letter that I'll read from Mike. On December 6th, you were the backup unit on a pursuit of a vehicle initiated by police officer Phil Harvey. The pursuit ended in a fiery crash when the person being pursued crashed into a pole. You immediately approached the vehicle and pulled the suspect to safety. You did this at considerable risk to yourself, not knowing how bad the fire was. The Norwood Police Department will award the Life-Saving Award when a police officer's actions are responsible for the saving the lives or prevention of great bodily harm to one or more persons in any particular incident. There is no doubt your actions were responsible for pulling this person to safety. You are hereby awarded the Life-Saving Award for your actions on December 6th. Please know that your commitment to preserving life is greatly appreciated. Mike, if you step forward to accept the award. Congratulations, Mike.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Does anyone have any comments?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, can you say a few words?
Yeah. Oh, Mike?
Either one of you.
Yeah, Mike.
I appreciate the award. Again, I think everyone would have done the same thing, so.
No, I'm not necessarily, not so
I
sure.
appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
And in a day and age when police officers are taking some heat, it's
That's for sure.
it's amazing that, more people don't know about this. So you, not only are, I'm sure your family's very proud of you, but know that council is very proud of you as well. So
Thank
you
you.
are everything that's right about Norwood and Norwood Police Department.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure he's going to want this for the Norwood Times, too.
Absolutely.
Can I get one over here?
The video was amazing, if anybody has seen it. Oh, my.
Thank you.
When I think of all the people that could have potentially been injured,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
without a doubt. Thank you again.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So we have no request to address council on agenda items nor standing committee reports. We do have, it says the second reading of ordinances or resolutions, but we have a brand-new Exhibit A, so just to make it cleaner so that no one questions what we're doing, I think we should take this new Exhibit A and we'll make it a first reading. So the ordinance is the same ordinance, but the exhibit was emailed out to us. So we're going to consider an ordinance to make temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the city of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31st, 2017. Mr. Sanker,
Madam President, I recommend we have all three readings.
seconded by Mr. Mumper. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sanker?
Madam President, yes, just briefly, there were, after reviewing the temporary, there were two items that showed up that were in the temporary original Exhibit A that were wrong. One was under the Superintendent of Public Works on their, on the original, it was on page 3, and their material and supplies, it showed up as a number sign and REF and then an apostrophe sign on the original, which cannot be in there. It was, actually, it was a computer error that showed up there. So on page 3 of that was removed. That shows 0 because it should have showed 0 on the original Exhibit A. On the old Exhibit A, under C9 Trust, on page 5, it showed $100,000 in that fund, but there is no money in that fund. Most of the funds are, that are in, like of that Fund 8, typically would show that they had revenue coming into that fund, or the revenue was there and transferred over from the year before. However, there was no money in that fund, and there was no, that $100,000 was not in there. However, if you refer back to page 4 on that, in the regular, the general fund under 2111, the subsidy to the C9 Trust, actually, it shows a $300,000 line item. So as funds are available, the C9 Trust will be paid out of the general fund, so that $100,000 that showed as far as being in that fund actually did not exist. That was an error. So those were the two changes, but we felt instead of amending and scratching those out here, we put a clean, everything else should match up. And so there, that's for the new Exhibit A that was distributed this evening. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your work. Is there any other discussion? The motion on the floor is to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Please have all three readings.
Ordinance making temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the city of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31, 2017. Ordinance making temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the city of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31, 2017. Ordinance making temporary appropriations for the expenditures of the City of Norwood, Ohio for the calendar year ending on December 31, 2017.
Mr. Mumford.
I move the ordinance be passed.
Seconded by Mrs. Hanahan. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzall.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan. Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumford.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. We have no resolutions, administration reports, or requests to address council. We'll move down to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. In our previous meeting, I had requested that we go ahead and get a committee of the whole, I guess, kind of on the books for the third or fourth week of January. And I know that you had said that you would talk with the police chief. Do we have a date by chance?
I spoke with the chief. He needs to get together with Officer Cintron, and he had hoped to do that today, but he had not done that. So he wanted to, first of all, the mayor had indicated to him that he wanted to see the presentation first. He has not had an opportunity to do that with the mayor. And as soon as the mayor saw the presentation, he was going to get together with Officer Cintron, and he was going to call me with a date.
Okay.
So as of this moment, there is no date, but hopefully within the next day or two, that will take place.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam President.
Also, as a follow-up to the last meeting, when we read that letter from Duke Energy about the rate decrease, but then it said something about an increase, I called them the next morning, and I think Mr. Gears indicated that in the minutes, but I did make a call to Duke Energy to verify that that was probably a form letter from a couple of years ago, and indeed it was. So there is no rate increase, it was all a rate decrease. So just follow up to the last council meeting. Is there any other unfinished business? Is there any new business? Mrs. Hanahan?
Hi, thank you, Madam President. I would like to call a meeting for the Housing, Health, and Recreation Committee to discuss some of the zoning ordinances that we've been going over. And I would like to do that either the 9th or the 16th of January. There is a council meeting on the 10th, so I don't know if you want to do it the same week or the following week.
I am personally unavailable on the 9th, but
You
the
are not
16th.
available? I'm sorry.
I'm not available on the 9th, but the 16th I am.
So is the 16th okay with you?
Yep.
Mr. Clark, is the 16th okay with you?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So January 16th, at what time?
6 o'clock. And may I request that the clerk of council send a letter to Mr. Stoker asking if he would have, telling we'd like him to attend that meeting also, so that he can explain these ordinances.
And that will be here in council chambers?
Yes.
And so, Housing, Health, and Recreation on January 16th at 6 o'clock PM in council chambers to discuss zoning ordinances.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome, thank you. Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Madam President. So for almost 10 years now, neighbors on Carthage Avenue have had to deal with a vacant building that's located at 5141 Carthage. It's quite a bit of a mess, and I won't go into all the details now, but definitely the city has worked in the past to try to do something with it. There's just been obstacles that have come up that have prevented that. But I'd like to request that the clerk of council send the law department a letter to request that they review the file on 5141 Carthage that's located in the building department, and to provide counsel on options that the city of Norwood could take in getting the property either, I guess, maintained, transferred to new owners, or demolished.
Okay, should be able to take care of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any other new business? Mr. Sanker?
Yes, Madam President. I would like to, while we have a quick second here, wish everybody in the city of Norwood and everybody, members of council and everybody here, all the city employees as well, a happy and safe and blessed new year. And hopefully 2017 brings us some good fortune here, and we can make some progress towards making everybody happy. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanker. If we can pull that off, it will be a miracle.
Amen.
Any other new business? Okay. We have no communications. I did hear from Mrs. Stickley. Members of her family were ill, which is why she could not attend today. Mr. Mumper.
I move we excuse the absent member.
Seconded by Mr. Clark. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzar.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Mr. Mumper.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded by Mr. Blair. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bonzal.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Sanker.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mumper.
Yes.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.